Hi friends and welcome to my channel. Here I would mostly be talking about photography and camera gear, and this would be my way of interacting with other like-minded artists sharing a similar interest. So I started my hobby with a Nikon p5.20 super zoom and soon wanted to upgrade to something serious and long term. The Nikon had a very small sensor and the ISO performance wasn't that good. I soon felt like I wanted something more. So at that time, this was around 2016 17, I was very much impressed with the Pentax system. And as compared to Canon and Nikon, what it was giving me and the unique range of features offered at the price. But due to lack of support and servicing and also lens arsenal, I started looking elsewhere. So around the same time, mirrorless systems were gaining prominence and had started showing some good results in comparison to their DSLR counterparts, with improvements mainly in the autofocus system, where they used to fall short previously. So around that time in 2017, I guess, Sony released a great new revolutionary camera, the A9, which shook the whole camera market with groundbreaking 20 frames per second, no blackout electronic shutter, and almost full sensor autofocus area coverage with eye and face tracking that will put even the flagship DSLRs to shame. But such a camera with so much innovation had a high price, naturally speaking. So it was out of my budget at that time. So what did I do? I waited till Sony released the A7 III, the budget-friendly entry-level full-frame camera, the third iteration of the A7 series. And around 2019, a year later, after the Sony A7 III was released, around the time the pandemic broke, I ended up buying the Sony A7 III. Cut to 2023 today. This video is about a gear choice for someone who is starting into the art of photography with a serious investment, a system camera where we have a separate camera body and compatible set of lenses, interchangeable as per needs. I have invested into the Sony system and I am happy about it. At the time I had bought my mirrorless Sony, Canon and Nikon were just starting taking baby steps in the mirrorless world. They didn't have the lens lineup to appeal someone trying to invest into a system for the long run. Something this is still applicable to a degree in 2023. Adapting existing DSLR glass was the only viable option. The autofocus system was immature and left a lot to be desired. Now please don't get me wrong here, this doesn't mean that they haven't improved. In fact, they have, and very fast, especially as far as the camera body is concerned. The R5 is one of the best high-end, high-resolution bodies out there. The recently released R6 Mark II blurs the distinction between the entry-level and a sports camera with its impressive 40 frames per second low-lag electronic shutter. The Nikon Z9 is in its own league. Sony, on the other hand, has matured its lineup with mirrorless lenses being released throughout the last decade. Sony has some other significant things going for it too, which other systems don't. The number of lens choices you have thanks to the third-party lenses. With Sony touting an open mount system, other lens manufacturers like Sigma, Samyang, Tokina can sign up for an agreement with Sony and start making lenses which work just like native glass. No need to reverse engineer. So this one's about the Sony full frame system and what lens choice you have while starting out. When I got my A7 III, I was also looking for a travel all around walk around general purpose zoom, and I had made up my mind that I'd be going for the 24 to 240 10x Sony zoom lens. I mean, it wasn't like I had many options, but it just happened that the camera store didn't have it in stock that day I bought my camera. So I ended up buying some other lens. I'll come back to it later. In 2021, I planned to have a short trip with my family and I had to get my hands on an all-purpose zoom lens. Luckily for me, the question was solved as Tamron had just released the 28 to 200. It was a no-brainer, and this is the lens right here. Just check it out. It weighs around 570 grams. It starts at f2.8. It has a 7x zoom. It's weather sealed. So this lens has an all plastic body, as you can see. It helps in keeping the weight less. This is the lens cap. Remove this. This is how it looks. Okay. If I remove the back, the mount is metal, and it has a rubber gasket, so it has internal seals also. And when zoomed in, this is how it looks. It has a double barrel zooming mechanism, and that is required for a high ratio zoom lens, 7x zoom lens. And as mentioned before, this lens starts at 28 mm and goes on to 200 mm. This is roughly the APS-C equivalent of 18 to 135 lens. It doesn't start at 25 mm, neither does it go until 240 or 280, but it has quite a few advantages under its belt. The biggest one are that despite being a high zoom lens, it gives excellent image quality and rivals the highly regarded Sony 24 to 105 G lens. Secondly, it does all this while starting with a fast aperture of f2.8. Most of the zoom lenses with high zoom ratio start at either f3.5 or f4, like the G lens itself, which means this Tamron is up to a whole stop faster in comparison. This is of course a variable aperture zoom lens as mentioned here. So it ultimately stops down to f5.6, but it holds f4 until 78 mm. It does not lose its aperture rapidly as you zoom to, and it does all this without adding too much weight and size, coming in at around 575 grams. It also uses the smallest lens filter among all its competitors, 67 mm, while also being quite small in comparison. So as far as aperture is concerned, it holds its maximum aperture of f2.8 just at the start at 28 mm, and it holds on till just about 31 mm. After that it does f3.2 from 32 to around 43 mm. It's f3.5 from 44 to around 55 mm, and f4 from 56 to around 78 mm. After that it's f4.5 till 116 mm, right around here. Okay, then f5, it drops to f5 till 157 mm, and from there till 200 mm it's f5.6. This means that it's effectively a 28 to 80 f2.8 to f4 lens, which also happens to go to 200 mm. Not bad for the size. And at 200 mm you can get good background separation from subject isolation. I think it gets tricky for lens manufacturers to have high zoom lens which also goes significantly wide. It has its effects on image quality, weight and or cost. So Tamron thought it's better to give up 24 mm at the wide end for all these advantages, and I think they did a fine job with it, weighing at around just 575 grams, costing around 730 USD. As with many Tamron lenses, it provides a decent but a variable minimum focusing distance, producing 1:3.1x at 28 mm and 1:3.8x at 200 mm. As far as negatives are concerned, there are really few. Its body is made up of plastic, no metal, but that keeps the weight down. It's a double barrel mechanism, which means even more room for dust particles to enter inside. My copy has gathered a few particles over its use of almost 2 years. I guess making a 7x zoom is difficult to achieve with a single barrel or an internal zooming mechanism. But the biggest con of this lens is that it doesn't go to 24 mm, which means you may often feel that you need something wider in those tight spaces where you simply can't go any back. So wide landscape or architecture and a wide perspective is difficult to achieve. This also means you may feel that need of another lens which goes even wider. Hence I think this will make for a good two lens combo when combined with the wide angle lens complementing this lens. Another point against this lens that can be made, if I'm nitpicking, is that this doesn't have any of those bells and whistles. No extra buttons, no extra switches or rings, which we often find in more recent iteration of lenses, like the updated 28 to 75 f2.8 G2 or the 35 to 150. It only has a lock switch, which locks the lens zoom mechanism at 28 mm. Here that is. If I lock it, you can lock it like this. Okay, it locks the zoom. We need this so that the lens does not creep when holding vertically. It also doesn't have any optical image stabilization and has to rely on the in-body image stabilization of the camera. And as far as autofocus is concerned, it uses a stepper motor, which is okay, which it is quick, but it's not as quick as a linear motor. I guess considering its utility, it's more than enough. Okay, so what are the alternatives of this lens? Well, at the time of release of this lens, there were two other options: the 24 to 240 10x Sony all-in-one zoom and the Sony 24 to 105 G4X zoom. Both of these start at 24 mm, over 28 mm of Tamron. The 24 to 240 boasts an impressive image stabilized 10x zoom. It expands beyond either of Tamron's extremes, but it's notorious for having bad image quality, and many users had expressed their dissatisfaction with its results. The Sony also costs an eye-watering 1000 USD, which is clearly overpriced for what it's providing, and its weight of 780 grams or 1.72 pounds makes it feel heavy and strenuous to hold over longer periods. The opposite is true for 24 to 105 G lens. It has a stellar image quality throughout the zoom range, which matches quite well with the Tamron, perhaps even beats it in the corners. It weighs 1.5 pounds or 670 grams, 100 grams more than that of Tamron, and cost varies from 1100 USD to 1300 USD, which is significantly higher compared to Tamron 730 USD. It's a constant f4 lens, so at 28 mm the Tamron actually has a whole stop advantage over it, which remains faster than the Sony at f3.5 till around 55 mm, after which both are at f4 till around 78 mm. The Sony has the advantage beyond this point, being a third stop faster till 105 mm. But where the Tamron truly shines is that it reaches almost double the reach of Sony at 200 mm, and you can do some wildlife and bird photography if you try getting a bit closer to your subject. If you strictly want to have a single lens option, though, for a trip or a vacation in mostly urban city areas, then the Sony has a real advantage. For its wider reach, you probably won't miss the 200 mm here. But if your trip includes a visit to a zoo or a national park, then the Tamron is a better choice. If a one-do-it-all lens isn't satisfying your requirements, then you can complement your lens with another one that goes wider or more telephoto than your walkaround option. For the 28 to 200 is the wide end that you need to compensate for, and there are quite a few options. If you want a light prime, then there's the Tamron 20 mm f2.8 with 1:2 macro, half macro basically. It's very lightweight and compact. There's also the Samyang 18 mm and 14 mm respectively, the latter being a bit pricey, but both options are pretty compact. But my favorites are the zooms. The Tamron 70 to 28, for example, makes the perfect complement with the 28 to 200. It's just 420 grams and has a very compact size, and also shares the same 67 mm filter size. You get a full f2.8 aperture throughout the zoom range. There's also the newer Sigma 16 to 28 f2.8, which performs on similar lines. If you want to go the Sony way, then I'd avoid the 24 to 240 if you care for image quality, as mentioned previously. It can be a fun lens to shoot with and can make you feel quite liberated, and can actually be a very fun and casual experience with no hassle needed to change lenses for architecture or wildlife. But there's a chance you may not be all that happy once you start going through your photos on your monitor at 1 to 1 ratio. It will give you a better result, than a super zoom lens, but you won't do justice to your expensive full frame setup. The Sony 24-105, although expensive, is a no-brainer in comparison to the 10x zoom in terms of image quality. With the high price, you get a much better body, a continuous f4 maximum aperture, a custom switch, and on camera switches for AF, MF, and optical stabilization. If you want to increase the reach at the telephoto end, you can couple this with a range of lenses depending on how much you are ready to spend. The Sony 100 to 400 GM is a premium grade lens, very expensive at 2500 USD, but very compact for a telephoto zoom. Or you can go for something modest and cheaper like the Sigma 100 to 400. There's also zooms like the Tamron 70 to 300 and 150 to 500. The former is a great budget-friendly telephoto option at around 500 USD, but will autofocus with normal speeds. A latter is expensive at around 3 times the price, but it will give a blazing fast autofocus and more range. On the wide end, there is the 12 to 24 f4G, which will put you back at around 1700 USD, but is light at around 550 grams and relatively compact. It also is a very sharp lens, as is customary with the G lineup. If you want something that is a bit light on your pocket, that you can consider one of the wider primes mentioned before. So yeah, here was my review of the Tamron 20 to 200 f2.8 to 5.6 all-in-one walk-around zoom, along with what I think are some of the good options and lens combination for travel walk-around type of photography. Do let me know what you feel about it in comment section, and have a great day. Peace out.